Today, we're talking about the Panama Canal. And look, I know what you might be thinking. A big ditch, right? But this is so much more than that. This is one of the greatest engineering stories ever told. It's a story of incredible ambition, of absolutely devastating failure, and ultimately, of solving a problem that most of the world thought was completely and utterly impossible.
Okay, so to really get the Panama story, you first have to understand the Suez Canal. The guy who built Suez, a French diplomat named Ferdinand de Lesseps, was basically a rock star, a global hero, and he made one tiny, tragic assumption, that Panama would be just like Suez. But as you can see here, he could not have been more wrong. He was trading a flat, dry desert for a mountainous, rain-soaked jungle. And that one fatal miscalculation, well, it would lead to an absolute disaster.
So here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we'll look at just how difficult this place, the Isthmus of Panama, actually was. Then, we'll dive into why the French effort failed so tragically. After that, we'll see how the Americans came in with a radical new game plan, how they finally engineered the canal, and what its legacy is for all of us today.
Right, so let's start with the problem itself. You see, building a canal in Panama wasn't just one big challenge. It was three colossal, soul-crushing challenges all hitting you at the exact same time.
Let's really dig into this. Geographically, you had a literal mountain range, the Continental Divide, smack in the middle of your path. You had the Chagres River, a beast that could rise 40 feet in a single day. Then the climate, endless torrential rains that turned the ground into this muddy, unstable soup, causing constant, deadly landslides. And on top of all that, you had these invisible killers, yellow fever and malaria, which were just devastating the workforce. The scale of it all was it was mind-boggling.
So who steps up to try and tame this monster? Well, it's our hero from Suez, Ferdinand de Lesseps. And the French vision he brought with him was logical, it was noble, and it was a complete and tragic failure.
And here it is, the fatal flaw. De Lesseps was absolutely determined to build a sea-level canal, just like he did in Suez. But in Panama, that meant digging a massive trench straight through the mountains. Every single time they dug deeper, the soggy, rain-soaked hills would just slide back in. It was this endless, heartbreaking cycle, a war against gravity and geology they simply could not win.
And that unwinnable war had a price tag, a staggering price tag. Back in the 1880s, the project burned through $287 million. That's over $8 billion in today's money. The whole thing collapsed into total bankruptcy.
But you know, that financial number, as huge as it is, it just pales in comparison to the human cost. An estimated 20,000 workers died. Think about that. They weren't just fighting the mud and the rock. They were fighting an invisible enemy they didn't understand. At the time, they thought the diseases came from foul air, miasma. They had no idea it was the bite of a mosquito.
So when the Americans took over in 1904, they didn't just pick up the French tools and keep digging. No, they hit the reset button. They came in with a completely new strategy based on brand new thinking in both medicine and engineering.
And this right here, this was the simple genius of the American approach. They figured out something the French never quite grasped. You can't build a canal if your workers are dying. So they made a radical decision. Before any major digging started, they were going to fight a totally different war, a medical war. And the general in this war was Dr. William Gorgas. Armed with the brand new scientific theory that mosquitoes spread yellow fever and malaria, he launched an all-out assault. His teams drained every swamp, every puddle. They fumigated buildings, installed window screens, and handed out quinine to workers. It was a massive public health campaign right in the middle of the jungle.
And the results? Well, they speak for themselves. Just look at that chart. Within 2 years, yellow fever, the most feared killer in Panama, was basically gone from the canal zone. It was a stunning medical victory that finally made the real construction possible.
So here's the key takeaway. The biggest breakthrough in Panama wasn't some new steam shovel. It was understanding the mosquito. Winning that war on disease was the absolute requirement for any engineering success that followed.
Okay, so the workforce is finally safe. Now the Americans could pivot to the engineering. And this is where they rolled out their other game-changing idea, a completely different kind of canal. Instead of that brute force sea-level plan, the Americans chose a lock canal system, and the concept is just beautiful in its simplicity. It's basically a water elevator, an aquatic staircase. You don't cut through the mountain, you lift the ships up and sail them right over it.
Here's how it works.
A ship sails into one of these huge concrete chambers. Giant steel gates close behind it. Then, valves open, and water from a lake up above just pours in, all powered by gravity. As the chamber fills, the ship just floats up, rising 85 feet to the level of the lake. Then you just reverse the process on the other side to go down.
And here's maybe the most brilliant part of the entire design. Zero pumps. Let that sink in. The whole system is powered by nothing more than the relentless force of gravity. By damming that unpredictable Chagres River, they created the massive Gatun Lake. They turned their single biggest problem into their engine.
Now, the lock system was a game changer, but it didn't mean the work was easy. Oh no, they still had to carve what was called the Culebra Cut, an 8-mile-long canyon through the mountains. Landslides were a constant nightmare. Sometimes a single slide could wipe out months of work in just a few minutes. It was still a brutal, unforgiving fight with nature.
But, digging the dirt was only half the battle. The real secret weapon, the thing the Americans mastered, was getting rid of it. The French system was always getting bogged down. The Americans, though, they engineered this incredible, non-stop railroad network. Trains ran like clockwork, and they could even move the tracks as the digging progressed. This mastery of logistics, that was a huge difference maker.
We also have to acknowledge the human system that actually built the canal. It was a rigidly segregated society. White American workers, who were mostly supervisors and engineers, were on the gold roll. They were paid in U.S. gold coin and got better housing and food. The vast majority of the manual laborers, mostly black workers from Caribbean nations like Barbados and Jamaica, were on the silver roll, with lower pay and separate, lesser facilities.
All right, let's bring this all home by looking at the timeline of this incredible achievement and thinking about its legacy.
Once they had the right plan, sanitation first, locks second, the project moved with unbelievable speed. The U.S. takes control in 1904. Just 2 years later, the lock design is a go. Major digging starts in '07, and by 1914, just a decade after they started, the canal was officially open for business.
So when you boil it all down, what was the magic formula? Well, it really rested on these 4 pillars. First, they adapted the engineering to the reality of the environment. Second, they used cutting-edge science to defeat disease. Third, they mastered the complex logistics of a massive industrial project. And finally, it was all backed by the immense power and deep pockets of the U.S. government.
In the end, the canal was so much more than a shortcut between oceans. It was proof of what humanity could do when it focused its industrial, scientific, and organizational might on a single problem. Which kind of leaves us with one last thought, doesn't it? What is the Panama Canal of our generation? What is that great, seemingly impossible challenge that's out there waiting for us to solve?